Hello YouTube, I hope you are well. Thank you for sharing time with me today. I'm going to have a cup of tea and converse with you. By the way, I am drinking echinacea, mildly diluted with fresh juiced Jonathan apples and a dash of cinnamon. Yeah, I have released all sodas from my diet. I may have one during the holidays as a treat. Other than that, I kicked it to the curb. I'm very excited. Now, I understand what you're about to view is a very long presentation. However, for those interested in this subject, I do think there are ideas here worth considering. If you have any questions as to why I constructed the video clips in the manner in which I did, please feel free to ask. It may appear I am attempting to humiliate another. I guarantee you this is far from the truth. I am spotlighting certain ideas. I am trusting you will make certain connections and that you will ask pertinent questions if needed. Let's not allow personalities to get in the way of our communication.
So brings me up to racial profiling. It's just the way of the world, folks. It's the way of the world.
We also have this quote from you. Quote, "There is no scale on which racial differences can all be ranked so as to draw across-the-board conclusions about racial superiority or inferiority." That sounds pretty good. But, quote, "It is certainly true that in some important traits, intelligence, law-abidingness, sexual restraint, academic performance, resistance to disease, whites can be considered superior to blacks. At the same time, in exactly these same traits, North Asians appear to be superior to whites." Do you really believe that?
Well, why would you not believe that? That's where all the evidence points. All of the evidence buttresses those positions. There's overwhelming evidence for that. Why would you, looking around the world today as we see it, why would you think for a moment that Haitians or Australian Aborigines, on average, are as intelligent as Japanese? Why would you think that? There's no evidence for it whatsoever.
You stop looking like you're up to no good, then people won't think you're up to no good.
A controversial practice that has ordinary citizens squaring off with the NYPD on a daily basis. Opposition to the stop and frisk program has swelled in recent days and weeks. Several police officers themselves have blown the whistle on the program, saying that the department is forcing them to meet quotas to provoke innocent civilians. Now, up until this point, there have been a lot of allegations and little evidence of wrongdoing. Until now, 2 recordings have made their way into the spotlight, each telling a different narrative about the program. The first is an audio from an NYPD officer where his superior told him who to target. He says, quote, "I have no problem telling you this. Male blacks, and I told you this at roll call, and I have no problem to tell you this, male blacks 14 to 21 in age." Now, the second is a recording of a young man's encounter with police officers. It's the first recording of its type.
You want to go to jail? For what?
Shut your mouth.
Why am I getting arrested for?
Shut your mouth.
What am I getting arrested for?
For being a mutt, you know?
2 tapes that leave 2 very big holes in the credibility of this program.
I'm not going to cry over it. I'm going to conduct myself accordingly so as to show those people I'm not here to do anything that you think black men do. And that's how we got to conduct ourselves.
Tonight estimate that the NYPD has made its 5 millionth stop and frisk stop under the Bloomberg administration. The overwhelming majority of people stopped are either black or Hispanic. And now a major case is about to start that could dramatically change the way the NYPD fights crime. Investigative reporter Jim Hoffer is here now with the story. Jim.
Liz, police departments from around the nation will be watching this trial very closely since many have adopted the NYPD's stop and frisk practices. Now a court will decide whether some of these tactics are unconstitutional. Inside this federal courthouse, the heart of the NYPD's crime-fighting tactic, stop and frisk, goes on trial Monday. This Harlem law student is a key plaintiff in that class action suit.
It took to recently, in 2008, for me to actually say enough is enough and I have to stand up.
David Ehrlich says he lost count of all the times he's been stopped and frisked by police for no reason.
It's a traumatic experience. My heart drops every time a police car passes.
He says he'll be taking the stand on behalf of millions of people stopped by police without reasonable suspicion.
Stop looking like you're up to no good, then people won't think you're up to no good.
It's a traumatic experience. My heart drops every time a police car passes.
He says he'll be taking the stand on behalf of millions of people stopped by police without reasonable suspicion. Since Mayor Bloomberg took office in 2002, the number of stop and frisk have gone from 97,000 to a peak of nearly 700,000 in 2011. 86% of them minorities.
I think there's an accumulation of very powerful evidence that I think makes an overwhelming case.
Darius Chardy will argue the case for the Center for Constitutional Rights.
I hope the outcome is that, finally after 15 years, the NYPD is actually going to be held accountable for violating the Constitution.
City lawyers will argue that stop and frisk has made the city safer than ever.
Under the Bloomberg decade, we've had a 51% decrease in murders in the city. And by far, we are the lowest city for murder.
But are the stops lawful? In pretrial motions, the judge has expressed skepticism, saying widespread practice of suspicionless stops displays troubling apathy toward New Yorkers' constitutional rights.
I've been stopped for walking to the store, walking from the back of my grandmother's house.
See, a lot of you all are out of touch with reality. That's the problem. You're not in touch with the ways of the world and how the world really is. And all you know how to respond with is knee-jerk reaction, emotional rhetoric.
And we know that both Mayor Bloomberg as well as Police Commissioner Ray Kelly have touted this program as a good thing. The whole point of this program is to reduce crime rates, but there is a certain amount of blowback. Critics say that these young men that are being stopped are not going to be comfortable going to police when they really do need help. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, after that happened to my stepson, and after I started noticing it happening to my nephews and other kids in the neighborhood, I started to really see that it was becoming a big problem. I really didn't pay too mind to it because, as myself, it happened to me so many times growing up that I thought it was normal, it was part of my culture. But, once it started affecting me when I was seeing it happen to other people, I realized that it was a big problem. So I decided to find some type of group that I could get involved with. And, when I found that group that was fighting against stop and frisk, I decided to get involved with that. And, I've been a fighter against it from October 21st all the way to now, nonstop.
That's just the way of the world, folks. People focus on the bad more than the good. I don't know why we're hardwired like that. It's just the way it is. See, a lot of you all are out of touch with reality. See, we need to stop kidding ourselves. Screw all the PC crap. We need to start calling things on for what they are.
I don't go through life with blinders on, acting as if I don't see what's right in front of me. It's like a story that I commented on a week or two ago that was on one of the popular channels on YouTube. And basically this person who was out in Texas with a big mouth was basically, and still is, trying to ferment racial strife leading up to the elections. First it was black people are going to tear America up if Barack Obama wasn't reelected. We're calling for riots. We're going to kill white people. Blase, blah, blase, blah. And basically, let me tell you something. There are ignorant people in every race. White people are no exception. Black people are no exception. So I will not pull a small percentage of that group from any group and say they speak for the masses.
And I'm being accused of making these videos to enrage. Well, if logic enrages people, then I'm guilty.
And I think that, you know, that it has made the community very unsafe because no one, especially the youth, they do not trust the police. They are more afraid of the police than they're afraid of anything that might be happening in the neighborhood that is negative. So police has been in the neighborhood and put a lot of fear in these kids. I mean, even Ray Kelly made a statement one time that he said that he wants these kids to, when they leave their home, he wants them to be afraid that they're going to be stopped, questioned, and frisked.
The mayor seemed completely unapologetic about the practice. He said it has to go forward, it's necessary. Do you have...
Well, I think the mayor is absolutely correct.
Some people are just very hurt by it and upset when they're stopped unnecessarily.
Well, I understand that. Some people, you know, you're taking away, at the very least, you're taking away people's time. So I understand people may not be happy with it, but I can also assure you that I go to the communities of color, people want more. So
they want more stop and frisk.
Absolutely.
You're not in touch with the ways of the world and how the world really is.
I had this captain who walked into the precinct and gave a speech about harassing the public. His words were, "We're going to go out there and we're going to violate some rights." We hear it from the captain down. We want 250s. This is stop, question, and frisk. Lieutenants, sergeants, they have no problem searching you, violating your rights, and racial profiling.
There was one statement that the sergeant said about what he used to do. He used to stop a guy walking down the street with baggy pants and his underwear hanging out, and he'd just stop him. He says, "I know he's probably up to nothing, but I just stopped him anyway just to get a 250.
It's this one cop that everybody in the neighborhood know. Stopped us like 3 times already. Like, he was like, "Nah, come here." So they got out the car. They threw my friend on the car. I'm still walking. He spun me around and punched me in my stomach. Started just patting us down, and they just left us there.
What we're trying to do is make certain that it's done as professionally as possible, that you know, proper respect is shown. It's done according to the law.
This goes all the way up to commissioner's office. I'd say even the mayor's office, where they're trying to be proactive and say, look, we're stopping people, we're getting drugs and guns off the streets. But it's not. I think it's of the 600,000 people that were stopped last year, only 1% of those that were stopped were carrying weapons.
When I came into this police department, I wanted to help people. But the civilian population, they're being hunted. Instead of being protected by us, they're being hunted, and we're being hated.
The police department is pushing the new guys to be bounty hunters. And I use that word because that's exactly what it is. They're hunting.
There's a lot of officers who are fed up and want to do something about it, and there's people who are scared.
There's a lot of officers that would like to tell their story, but nobody wants to hear the truth. Nobody wants to hear the bad.
You know, black men playing this pity card like everybody's against them, bull crap. If you stop looking suspicious, people won't think you're suspicious. I can promise you that.
Saying that they are forced to essentially have these kind of quotas, although quotas are, the term quotas for police officers is banned in New York City. So do you think that it is a cultural problem within the NYPD or an individual officer problem?
Well, I think the whole department, I mean, even if you're an officer that is being forced to do it, you know, you have the right not to do something that is not moral, something that it bothers you, that bothers your conscience. And that's what some of these officers are doing, is psychologically bothering them, you know, to be forced to do this. And they know it's wrong. So that's why, I'm happy that there is some of them coming out and speaking against it. And there's the others, they're afraid because they're under a lot of pressure. You know, I mean, they have families to feed, they got children to take care of, so they're under a lot of pressure. So, you know, I understand, but still, there's no justification to go into any community and harass people or target people just because you're trying to make, make quotas or make a certain amount of tickets. I mean, yesterday I heard on trial that they have something that, the officers tell them, 2 and 20, go out there and get 2 arrests today and get 20 summonses. I mean, they really, it's really a lot of pressure on both sides.
Black men playing this pity card like everybody's against them, bull crap. If you stop looking suspicious, people won't think you're suspicious. I can promise you that.
Today, I will discuss a topic that is very touchy for many who have repeatedly experienced it. What I will address is not a means to placate a sense of politically correct justice or to attend to a victimhood mentality. If this is all you distill, you have missed the inner edible part of the message. I invite you to take a few minutes out of your day and think, feel. Before jumping off into our conversation, allow me to amend the soil. First, let's ignore those who have the light on, and let's embrace a realism. Color is only meaningful when you have a light source. It is something that is described in terms of one's perception. What we know is that some of you listening are human. As part of the human collective, it is revealing some of the observations that I have made in regards to our preoccupation with race. In part, I comprehend, depending on your practical nature and emotional, mental, or dare I say, spiritual development. Well, I comprehend it does and doesn't, simultaneously speaking, matter. Speaking of race, speaking of color, it matters to those who are obsessed with power, who are haunted by bloodlines. They use this knowledge to determine who they will shit on first and who they will shit on the hardest, depending on their disposition. It matters if you are a victim of a setup or if you are foolish enough to play a game you do not fully comprehend. However, race or national extractions doesn't matter, because if you are not part of the plutocracy, if you are not a power broker within the neo-feudalism playground, if you do not support the fascist sledgehammer, you will be but a distant memory. I will belabor the point immediately, so here we go. A significant part of what we are experiencing comes down to how much responsibility we want to accept for ourselves, our society, and how we select to apply ourselves. Until we address that, we are marginally effectual. People cannot seem to come to terms with the obvious. Herding people into certain racial taxonomic groupings is an effective means of control. We can appreciate and maintain differences without certain labels. However, I understand our minds work well with labels, though we do not have to be controlled by them. We can definitely escape groupthink easier without certain labels. We definitely could see clearer. Just abandon the need for hierarchies and the corruption that comes with it, or that appears to be inherent within it. When I was young, I had many experiences where I was the subject of racial profiling. At that time, I did not think of things like endemic crime, penetrating issues that fueled criminal activity, or the possible breakdown of the so-called social fabric. I did give thought to the departure from norms of appropriate conduct, and all that I could comprehend at that stage of my development. Fortunately, I never suffered certain perversions of actuality, like crime only occurring in bad neighborhoods. Not only did I know this was a deviation from reality, but that this was code for neighborhoods chiefly composed of blacks, Mexicans, and poor whites. Rarely did I bother myself with who was committing crime. I knew the ubiquitous answer was going to be a member of the supposed minority class. This was my first overt realization of being subjected to programming, something outside of myself. Later, I was introduced to various theories and arguments, such as the nature-nurture debate regarding violence and its interplay with blacks. One thing was clear. Both sides seem, with the exception of certain individuals, not to be concerned with truth. What I was concerned with was not if American cancer research had conclusively shown black men to have higher levels of testosterone than their white counterparts. As far as I was concerned, the increased propensity for aggressive activity due to an androgenic hormone was not nearly as intriguing as self-control and emotional management. So I left that debate to the racist, the apologist, and the overly politically motivated. However, the repeated occurrences which happened to me made one thing obvious. It did not matter how I dressed, the fluency of my speech, or my mannerisms. Police officers would chronically annoy me with their often obvious lies, the lies they use to stop me. This did not matter if I was walking down the road, riding my bike, or driving a car. Yet I noticed if I was in mixed crowds or was with solely white men of the same age dressed in a similar manner as I would rarely be addressed. I would rarely even be acknowledged from those outside of the group. Then I noticed that this happened to me no matter where I traveled in America, yet it never happened to me when I was out of the country. So though I understand, though I comprehend that anecdotal evidence and personal empirical data is not necessarily meaningful to anyone other than I was convinced this annoyance and possibly life-threatening activity that could come from it if things were to go south occurred because I was black. As simple as that. Just what they saw, what they perceived. Unfortunately, those connections that they made after their perception was in full swing, well, it affected me and I had to deal with the reality of it. I never obtained mind-independent data. To the contrary, so I accepted what my experience brought to me. Then, of course, I was plagued with the so-called brothers that did not care about themselves or other black men. They were a part of the criminal element, and though I attempted to have sit-downs with them to talk some sense into some of the younger ones, it was dismissed. I was brushed aside. They continue to generate data for the enemy by engaging in the world activities that they lusted for. Now, the enemy in this case was anyone who had not divested themselves from the stereotypical hypnotic trance of race. Of course, the more you were around those who were different, especially the tribal enthusiast, the more you were suspected of being potentially dangerous. Now, I expected this of regular folk. I did not expect, nor can I tolerate it to this day from professionals. What really got to me was the feedback from my elders. That is, after my reports of harassment by police officers, my narration did not elicit the slightest surprise from my elders. Many of them had went through much worse, yet looking at their life, I could see most were honorable men of color, so it just didn't jive within me. So, why do we tolerate racial profiling? Could it be the same thing that we experienced when we kept our silence, speaking collectively when President Bush and Attorney General John Ashcroft did their little dance, did their little hocus pocus, and put things into motion that restricted civil liberties, all in the name of fighting terrorism? Yeah. Now, I also had to ask some very painful questions, like, were members of my group only complaining because racial profiling was affecting them? Some were, some were not. Some of us got it. We understood we had to look beyond ourselves, that we could not be willing to tolerate this, not for ourselves, not for anybody, that we had to be loud in our complaints, that we had to be consistent, that we could not let public opinion sway us, that we could not fall into the same sort of okey-doke many people did when they were trying to emotionally and mentally wrap themselves around the idea of 9/11, that we couldn't put it on the back burner, that we had to see the danger for what it is, and that we had to be concerned about it, like I said, outside of ourselves. So, when dealing with all of this, I had to get rid of the bullshit in my head, the tapes that said, if they don't act like me, if they don't look like me, then something must be wrong with them. But you know, I really didn't suffer with that very much. That was easy to get rid of. That never really was something I had to struggle with. It didn't have a hold on me. But there was a little bit of that there. I knew from recalling lessons that I had learned in junior high school about how we treated foreigners within America, how the Japanese-born people within America were sent to intern camps and mistreated during World War II. I knew I couldn't fall for that sort of mentality. I couldn't co-sign on that. However, I did have to ask myself questions like, how can law enforcement not consider ethnicity when they were investigating crimes? Of course, they needed to consider certain phenotypical traits, things that allowed them to identify others. But that really wasn't the issue, now was it? It wasn't merely the consideration of these things to point them in the right direction. We knew that racial profiling, meaning me and them, all of us, we know racial profiling is much more complex than we care to admit. We understand this. The issue lies within accountability. We have to establish what we're going to put up with, what police mechanisms of accountability we can agree upon, how we're going to take accountability into ourselves so to ensure that law enforcement conducts themselves in proper ways. Many of us, honestly, I do not believe, have done very much in regards to this. It is something that we only occasionally visit, especially for those who never are subjected to this sort of experience. However, I think all of us can relate to the concept of being considered guilty even though we are innocent, because we're supposedly to value the concept that we are innocent until we are proven guilty. Let's be honest. In this world that we live in, many times none of us really particularly care what's going on because there's so much hate clouding our eyesight. We can't even give energy to the fact that we all have a right to live like anyone else unless we have proof of wrongdoing. No, we're willing to toss that all aside for the sake of generating supposed progress. Pathetic. So again, I ask, why do we tolerate racial profiling? Some say we should because it works, that capturing criminals requires using methods which may be deemed to be politically incorrect but effective. Funny, I do not label it as PC actions when considering what is right and what is wrong. I do acknowledge the need for methods that can frequently be used to maintain common courtesy and dignity. I get it that sometimes people do not give you that option to treat them with dignity. That aside, some say it is just the way of the world. It is just the way of the world. That we should suck it up and show ourselves to be the good Negro, the good Mexican, the good Asian, the good Native American, the pretentious, wealthy white person who is trying to hide from their poor economic class. Well, I will pass on this plan. I do not require to prove my standing or guard my reputation to some young, well-indoctrinated, let's say, white cop that just learned to properly wipe his ass not long ago, or from any cop hardened by what he or she has seen, or those who repeatedly fail to relegate the experience to the shelf of the individual or subset actions, or even worse, a so-called minority officer that feels they have something to prove and fall in line with what is expected of them instead of what is right. This group has duped themselves regarding the importance of freeing themselves for the sake of appearances, yes, unshackling themselves from the stigma of any undue bias. All accomplished by being harder on those, of course, that look like them versus maintaining fair treatment for all. Actions that are properly dictated according to the experience. One thing is sure, especially in places which are similar to New York, racial profiling has indeed gotten out of hand. It appears many cops have no issue pretending they have reasonable suspicion to believe someone may be armed and presently dangerous. Personally, I don't get how some of us can be so concerned about church functions or get wrapped up in other frivolous activities that drain our energy and allow us to be complicit factors in the madness that we are experiencing around us. Racist whites have to be some of the dumbest people around. Yeah, I'm going to pick on them just for a second. Bear with me. I say this because they do not think of the legal long run because they are the majority. They are so blinded by their hate. Yet some of these jokers claim to love America. Right. Some of them will give up all kinds of freedom to placate their obsessions. And believe me, other group members, you do things just as self-defeating as they do. Obtuse minorities that invest in the disconnect from reality, that surrender to the way things are, that this is just the way of the world. They are also warped. They fail to remember they are on the bottom of the totem pole and will be hit first and hardest. Yet, many of them will claim they are realists. Right. We all need to turn this insanity around. Listen to the words of Justice William Douglas. He was speaking about things absent of probable cause when he commented here. He stated, quote, "We hold today that the police have greater authority to make a seizure and conduct a search than a judge has to authorize such action. We have said precisely the opposite over and over again. To give the police greater power than a magistrate is to take a long step down the totalitarian path. Perhaps such a step is desirable to cope with modern forms of lawlessness. But if it is taken, it should be the deliberate choice of the people through a constitutional amendment." End quote. Again, humans have a way of not caring unless it involves them directly. Compound the issue with social standing and race, and we have a hot mess, and it becomes predictable what we are facing. Fact: blacks, Mexicans, and Latino males are most vulnerable when we speak of racial profiling and stop and frisk. They are frequently subjected to these harsh realities. We that are members of these groups are disproportionately targeted. I am willing to assert without hard data that we comprise about 80% of all stops. I am purposefully being conservative in my estimation, by the way. We are definitely unjustifiably considered potentially dangerous. We have to get away from thinking in archaic ways. We have to learn to keep what is correct, what works, what is best in the long run, and we need to release those things that do not work and bring new things into the light of day. Using New York as a prime example, and you have watched the clips, the New York PD maintains a detailed database by precinct. It includes stops, weapons recovered, frisk, and use of force. In 2002, the New York Police Department made about 97,000 stops and frisk. In 2006, it was over 475,000. In 2011, it was approximately 680,000. In 2012, it was roughly 700,000. And this is probably being conservative. If you can say with a straight face, after all that you have considered here, after all of the things that you have heard throughout your life, that the realities that we face around the country, and especially in high volume areas like New York City and other departments that face similar challenges, if you can say with a straight face that you have no concerns, that none of this raises any serious concerns within you over illegal stops, privacy rights, and racial profiling, then we are in worse shape than I thought. Thank you for listening.
I am putting this video up as a video reply to Only When Provoked, in commenting upon the police action in Cambridge, Massachusetts, to the arrest of the professor who happened to be black. Now, my point of view on this, and I'm going to make this really, really short, because this has to be boiled down to something really, really important. I think OWP did a very nice job of it, but I want to even cut it down a little bit further, and that is to say that regardless of your stance on racism in this country, whether you're white or black, it makes no difference at this point in time. In my point of view, it makes no fucking difference anymore. Alright? You could be a complete fucking racist, hate blacks. You could be a racist and hate whites. It doesn't make any fucking difference right now, because what we have right now is we have a police state. And the police state, if you are sitting there thinking that you're victimized because you're a black, or because you're a poor white, or because you're some other group that think is disenfranchised, you better fucking grow up. And you better realize that the police state is here, and it's going to stomp its fucking foot in your fucking face. Whether you're black, white, it doesn't make any fucking difference. So what needs to be done right now, in my view, is that we need to throw aside this entire racist fucking issue, turn aside the entire idea of racism, okay? And focus on the point right where it needs to be focused, and that is the out-of-control fucking behavior of the fucking police. And the continued encroachment on our rights and freedoms by the police state mentality of this fascist government agency that we call the police, who are supposedly there to protect and serve. And all they end up doing is crushing and fucking destroying. So put aside your racist ideas, put aside the whole idea of race, and realize this goes far beyond that. Far beyond it. Focus on the real problem at hand, and that is the idea that the police have gone far beyond. And they're going to continue going in that direction, and it's not going to matter what race you are. You're going to be affected at some point in time. Thank you. Good night.